The grid has become a staple of front-end development as it helps you structure a layout in terms of columns. Skeleton's grid system is based on 12 columns. Now, the process of establishing a column requires first defining a div class of row. Then, your column divs should be the immediate child nested inside of the row class. For the column divs, the class attribute consists of two different elements. First, the number of columns, specified as being 1 through 12, and second, the column or columns class. You can add as many columns as you wish, as long as they add up to 12. So let's give this a shot in our project that we set up from the previous module. Let's visit our index.html file, and we're going to get rid of everything here between the body tags. First, we're going to put a div of class container, which gives us a fixed width container for our layout. Next, inside, we're going to put our div class of row. And then next, we're going to put in a div class of one column. And because we're using one, we use singular column, not plural. And I'll just put in col here in the middle. Now, I'm going to use here in Visual Studio Code, Shift Alt and the down arrow key. And this will give us 12 columns. And so that we can actually see the columns, let's also go to our CSS main CSS file. And I'm going to reference both the column and plural, the columns class. Give it a background of light gray and a height of, let's say, 500 pixels. All right, we'll save it and go back to our browser. Okay, so now we can actually see the columns, and the white space between are the gutters. Content cannot actually reside inside of these gutters. They're there simply to give us white space to separate the content within our columns. Now, if we drag this layout in, we could see that the columns and gutters respectively are based on a percentage up until a smaller viewport. And this is by design, as you generally do not want a lot of columns floating with each other on such a small device. Going back, let's go back to our index.html file, and let's transform this into a two-column layout. So let's go ahead and get rid of everything with exception to two columns, and we'll add this one. We're going to rename to 3. And we're going to change column to columns plural. And then also remember it needs to add up to 12. So we'll change this here to 9 and make column plural. Let's save. And there we go. Let's also try adding 3 columns. So going back, we'll go ahead, copy this, paste it. We'll change this to equal 3 columns. So we'll make this 4. We'll save it and go back once again. And there you go. Now, outside of utilizing 1 through 12 to structure your layout, Skeleton also provides a few shorthand column widths. You can use 1/3, 2/3, and 1/2 column widths. So let's give it a try. We'll go ahead and remove this third column, and we'll change this here from 4 to 1-3. We use singular for columns, and this will be 2-3 and singular columns once again. And there you go. You can see it works, and by the way, everything will still respond just as we were using the 1 through 12 class names. And then finally, let's try one more, and we'll change this to 1/2 as well as the other to 1/2. All right, great. So by now, you should have a pretty solid understanding of how to structure basic grid systems with Skeleton, but I want to show you one more thing real quickly. Going back to our index.html, notice this div class of container. Well, what will happen if we remove it? I'll save, and we'll go back. All right, So what happened by removing the container class, we've just transformed our centered fixed width layout to a 100% fluid layout in which the columns still behave the same. So we can drag this in, and you can see they behave exactly the same as before. Now, sometimes you may find it preferable to use a fluid layout as opposed to a fixed width layout. But for the layout that we're going to develop throughout this course, we're going to leave the container class in. So let's back up with Control Z just a couple times and save it. In the next video, we're going to examine grid offsets.